guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Guardian. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 43. Zhao Yunlan has no choice but to put his arm under Shen Wei's to hold him up, tangled together in an almost embrace. Fortunately, a drunk Shen Wei is silent and goes where he's told. He doesn't talk gibberish or act like a lunatic. Zhao Yunlan shakes himself awake, hastily settles the others, and drags Shen Wei off. Swiping Shen Wei's keycard, he opens the door to the room next to his. He hesitates, but in a rare moment of moral integrity, he manages to hold back and not take advantage of Shen Wei's compromised state. He lets go of Shen Wei next to the bed and makes him sit down. Looking at Shen Wei's vacant and bland expression, he can't help but ruffle his hair. "You can't hold your drink, but you drank from me anyway. Where do I find someone else as silly as you?" Shen Wei looks up and stares at him with wide, unblinking eyes. "Wait, I'll fetch you a towel to wipe your face." Zhao Yunlan walks into the bathroom and takes 2 towels. He soaks one in cold water and the other one in hot water. About to take the towels to the drunken kitten, he turns around and is startled. Shen Wei is leaning in the doorway. He has no idea how long he's been standing there already, in complete silence, watching him with a look so intense it almost takes Zhao Yunlan's breath away. The weight of Shen Wei's gaze pins him in place. He lifts a towel towards Shen Wei. "Here!" Shen Wei's reaction is sluggish. He only raises his hand after a long time. But when he does, it slips past the towel, grabbing Zhao Yunlan by his wrist. Aggressively, he pulls Zhao Yunlan towards himself. Ooh, Shen Wei's being real forward right now. Zhao Yunlan has long felt that something is off about Shen Wei tonight, but he's very pleased with this turn of events. He doesn't resist at all and is easily pulled in. With overwhelming strength, Shen Wei pushes him up against the wall, sealing their lips together, gnawing and tearing at them like a wild beast. Wow, so Shen Wei is the one to make the first move. Our shy professor who's always the one that's running away is the one to reach out first and kiss Zhao Yunlan. Good for him, I guess, you know? After being a little drunk, he finally let his true feelings be known. And, you know, Zhao Yunlan doesn't mind it at all. He's actually kind of digging it, so I guess it's a win-win for both of them. Zhao Yunlan almost instantly tastes his blood. Oh, a little aggressive there, Shen Wei. Which turns him on. Zhao Yunlan! He wraps his arms around Shen Wei's back, deft fingers sneaking underneath Shen Wei's shirt and seductively caressing his back. The skin he touches is cooler than normal human temperature, like smooth and lush jade. Except this precious gem is ruthlessly clawing and tearing at his clothes. Wow, okay, so Shen Wei is like a beast when he's drunk. Zhao Yunlan bares his throat in encouragement and lets him go on a rampage. His hand wanders downwards and suggestively reaches for Shen Wei's backside, sneaking into his trousers. But before he can explore further, his entire body is abruptly lifted up. He's caught off guard, his feet dangling in midair, his body rapidly turning full circle before he falls backwards, landing on the bed. Shen Wei's weight pushes him down and holds him in place. The bed rattles with the impact. Fortunately, the hotel has soft pillows and thick duvets, so the fall doesn't hurt. Zhao Yunlan gives a pro forma yelp and wipes blood off the corner of his lips. He chuckles. "Babe, you're too hot!" Shen Wei looks down at him from above, his dark eyes swirling with unspeakable, overwhelmingly intense affection. Wow. I cannot believe how forward Shen Wei is right now, guys. It's happening! A faint flush spreads across his face, and under the dim lighting, he looks more handsome than ever. Zhao Yunlan's heart beats faster. He takes off Shen Wei's spectacles and sits up halfway, only to pull Shen Wei in by his waist. He pulls down Shen Wei's shirt collar, letting his fingers trail along the edge of the fabric, lighting flames of passion as they slide down, slowly unbuttoning the shirt and revealing Shen Wei's pale, but not frail, body. Zhao Yunlan's pupils are blown with pleasure as he leisurely kisses Shen Wei's chest. He says with a magnetic voice, "I was gonna let you off the hook tonight, but you started this yourself." Suddenly, Shen Wei seizes his shoulders, pushes him down, and pounces forward, biting Zhao Yunlan's throat. He locks his wrists in place and holds him on the bed tightly. Zhao Yulan feels that the man on top of him is panting more heavily by the minute. It's like he wants to swallow him whole. Zhao Yulan is quite surprised by how passionate and aggressive he is. The biting is a bit painful, so he laughs and resists a little. All right, baby, take it easy, you... Somehow, his small movements trigger a switch. If Shenwei was a little rough before, now he goes utterly frantic. He shoves Zhao Yulan's flailing arm up behind his back, flips him face down, and clutches his nape as if trying to strangle him to death. Zhao Yulan is straining to look up, and he feels that his old bones are cracking. Okay, Shenwei, a little too rough. You're getting a little too handsy. Calm down a little. Shenwei weighs him down with his own body, and his icy fingers grasp Zhao Yulan's chin. Predatory kisses are bombarding his face. The lights in the room go off on their own, and in the darkness, the only sounds are the man's impatient grunts and gasps, like those of a fierce beast that has been starving for years. Zhao Yulan's half-buttoned shirt is slashed open by force. That's enough, babe! Shenwei! Zhao Yulan is aroused, but he doesn't want to go along with the Shenwei too drunk to know what he's doing. With great agility, he leans back, pushing up his shoulder and freeing his arm. Shenwei howls and then stops moving all of a sudden. Without a sound, he falls into Zhao Yulan's arms. He isn't moving at all. The lights go back on as if a switch was flipped. He passed out! Shenwei got too aggressive and then he passed out from being too drunk. Zhao Yulan blinks against the light and stretches his hurting shoulder. Shenwei is still in his arms. Zhao Yulan is now definitely not in the mood anymore and laughs bitterly. Even when you're drunk, you're special. Zhao Yulan's voice stops midway and his eyes widen. His intoxication seems to evaporate. He's suddenly wide awake with terror. In the silence, he can't hear Shenwei breathing. Zhao Yulan presses his hand against Shenwei's neck. Some 10 seconds later, there's still no pulse. Shenwei's face is still a little red, but his body seems like that of a corpse. Shenwei! Shenwei! Zhao Yulan flips him over and slaps him in the face. There's no response. He starts performing CPR. The man lying on the bed is like a mannequin. No matter how hard Zhao Yulan tries, there is no change. F! Zhao Yulan jumps off the bed and picks up his phone from the floor, stuffs the battery back in that had fallen out, and calls emergency. Following the doctor's suggestion, Zhao Yulan looks through Shenwei's luggage. If he has a long-term illness, there must be some medicine. Oh dear. Zhao Yulan thinks that Shenwei died from being too intoxicated and, going overboard after making out with him. Oh dear, Shenwei, what are you doing? At this instant, Zhao Yulan's eyes snag on his ripped shirt. From the left shoulder to the lower right abdomen, a long diagonal slit cuts the thick winter shirt in two. Zhao Yulan examines the edge and realizes that it was a cut by a sharp blade. Shenwei's hands are empty. There's nothing, not even a nail clipper. Where did he get a sharp object? Zhao Yulan is still half drunk and has just had a huge shock, but now he finally comes back to his senses. A normal human wouldn't stop breathing and lose his heartbeat so instantly. Even a sudden heart attack has certain symptoms that come with it. But Shenwei was like the lights in the room, switched off instantly. Zhao Yulan looks back at the man lying on the bed and frowns. He takes a black leather notebook from his laptop bag and slowly walks to the side of the bed. He pulls out a yellow paper talisman from the notebook and picks up a strand of Shenwei's hair. He curls the talisman around the hair, burns it, and lets the ashes fall into the notebook. Like salt sprinkled into water, they vanish without a trace. Moments later, a line of writing emerges on a paper in the notebook. Great menace, a soulless person. Zhao Yulan's expression turns deadly serious. He presses one hand to the page and asks, "Where does this person come from?" The writing on the page flickers and disappears. After a long while, another line of words emerges. From beneath the depths of the underworld, an unspeakable place. Zhao Yulan frowns. A few moments later, he quietly tidies up the room and fastens his ruined shirt together with a few small safety pins. He picks up his jacket that he'd thrown aside in drunken carelessness and puts it back on. The ambulance arrives shortly afterwards. The others all rise in alarm, and amidst the chaos, Shenwei is carried away. Oh no. The students are especially panicked, but Zhao Yulan forces them to stay behind. He signals Lin Jing to take care of them and follows Shenwei to the hospital. Shenwei's heart is still not beating. The doctors are frantically trying to save him. Zhao Yulan stands aside and waits in silence. He knows there's nothing wrong with this body. It's probably just that the person who possessed his body passed out drunk, and his temporary absence is now causing these frightening symptoms. He hides his hand behind his back and takes out a summoning talisman. The paper ignites silently in his palm. 4 burnt talismans later, Shen Wei is still unconscious. Time passes and the doctors begin to think he is dead. Zhao Yulan concentrates and ignites the 5th one. He recites in his mind, "Lost soul, heed my call." The 3rd time he recites this, the talisman flashes, and Shen Wei's body shudders. Zhao Yulan hears someone shout, "There's a heartbeat! There's a heartbeat!" Only then does Zhao Yulan sigh in relief. He superstitiously hides the handful of ashes in his pocket. Shen Wei seems to have no intention of waking up just yet. The ambulance brought him to the hospital in the middle of the night, and the doctors are running various checks on him, unable to find anything. Zhao Yulan has to stick around now, shivering in the winter night, just because he called the ambulance while he was still half drunk. Even his friend Mr. Long finally gets the news and rushes to the hospital. He never thought drinking could land you in there. Zhao Yulan urges him to go back home. That poor fat guy, his face has turned green in terror like a cucumber, a shivering autumn cucumber. Oh, how is Shen Wei gonna explain this misunderstanding? How's he gonna clear it up? The doctors are like, "Sir, you were legally dead for quite a while. How did you resurrect yourself?" When Shen Wei finally wakes up, he freezes for a moment. All sorts of tubes are connected to his body. He struggles to recall what happened, sits up, and begins pulling off the tubes. "I'm afraid you'll have to stay here for a few more days," a voice says from the corner of the room. Shen Wei realizes Zhao Yulan is in the room, wearing a big overcoat and holding a steaming cup. Hospital? Shen Wei is stunned. Then his face changes. Did I drink too much? Not just too much, your heart stopped beating. Shen Wei never realized he was such a lightweight. He casts around for an excuse, but Zhao Yulan gently puts his cup down. "But this is my fault too. I was dizzy and only half conscious, and you scared me. I really shouldn't have called an ambulance. I'm sorry I have to trouble you to stay and play along for a few days." The more Shen Wei listens, the more something feels wrong here. Zhao Yulan pauses for a moment and finishes his sentence. "Your Honor." Oh, the cat's out of the bag! Zhao Yulan has finally put 2 and 2 together and realized that Shen Wei is the Ghost Slayer. How is Shen Wei gonna explain this now to his beloved? I bet Zhao Yulan's gonna want a big explanation. Your Honor, you have been helping me out with the Guardian Order for quite a while, and I've been trying to seduce you as a professor, but it turns out you are one and the same. Now I'm really embarrassed, and it's really awkward, because we're work partners. So, I wonder how Shen Wei's gonna have to explain this to him. Because in the, I believe in the drama, in the live-action drama, I believe that Zhao Yulan found out later than here. Here, I think Zhao Yulan is finding out a lot earlier than in the drama of Shen Wei's true identity. So, just to quickly recap, Shen Wei is a lightweight, so after drinking with Mr. Long, he kind of like is sluggish, so Zhao Yulan offers to take him back to his room, and when they get back to his room, Shen Wei gets really handsy and really aggressive and starts like making out with Zhao Yulan. Now, Zhao Yulan digs this, right? He's really into an assertive Shen Wei, but he's a little too aggressive. Like, there's some biting, there's some blood, there's some slashing and tearing of clothes, and then Shen Wei passes out. So Zhao Yulan's like, "Okay, well, I'm not in the mood anymore, but Shen Wei, dear, are you okay?" And then he finds out that Shen Wei is not breathing, so he freaks out and calls 911. But then he eventually puts 2 and 2 together and finds out that Shen Wei is not a regular human. Not only is not a regular human, but he is His Honor, the Ghost Slayer. So Shen Wei just woke up in the hospital and is gonna have to explain some things to Zhao Yulan now. How is the Ghost Slayer gonna explain his huge fat crush on Zhao Yulan on the Guardian? Let's keep reading. Chapter 44. For long minutes, Shen Wei doesn't say a word. Zhao Yulan is in no hurry. He sits motionlessly in his corner. The hospital room is so quiet, you can hear the ticking of Zhao Yulan's wristwatch. Eventually, Shen Wei sighs and wipes his hand. In the blink of an eye, the hospital gown is replaced with a huge black robe. His blade appears in his hand, and he simply lays the ancient weapon down across his lap. This time, he isn't hiding his face. How did you find out? He asks quietly. Zhao Yulan looks at him and ponders. Finally, he says, Actually, I wasn't sure. I was just testing the waters. The look on Shenwei's face is difficult to describe. He tricked him! Zhao Yulan, this smart cat. He tricked Shenwei into revealing his identity himself. Okay. Zhao Yulan smiles. Of course, I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't already picked up some clues, like your small puppet messenger that arrived after I entered the Hanga cave. I mentioned the underworld guard, but didn't say what he was doing, but you already knew he was leading a few hundred people to the afterlife. I couldn't help but recall the underworld guard bowing twice towards the car. I asked Zhuheng about you, and she only remembered you when you arrived. You travel much faster than I, Your Honor, so you must have made a trip downstairs. And also, when he had stared at him sleeping that night in the hut. This was when Zhao Yulan had first become suspicious. But now it seems inappropriate to mention that to the Ghost Slayer. Zhao Yulan pauses and swallows down the rest of his sentence. Plus, your breathing and heartbeat stopped so suddenly that I got curious and asked the Book of Life and Death. It told me that Shenwei is a soulless person from an unspeakable place. Zhao Yulan taps his fingers on his knees. Now that I think about it, there were quite a few telltale clues. The Ghost Slayer is silent. He probably has no idea what to say. Actually, Zhao Yulan feels rather uncomfortable as well. He suddenly wishes he hadn't stated everything so bluntly. As soon as he remembers the things he got up to with Shenwei in the past and his motives, he really just wants to keel over and claim amnesia. He massages his temples, feeling that his IQ must have plummeted rapidly tonight, given how many stupid decisions he made. They're both feeling really awkward now. The two remain silent for a long time, until Zhao Yulan finally decides to face his embarrassing actions and coughs. I didn't know before that Professor Shen was... if I ever offended you, please forgive me, Your Honor. Shenwei just shakes his head. Zhao Yulan actually has more questions now, rather than fewer, but seeing the vacant and bewildered look on Shenwei's face, he can't bring himself to ask any of them. He rinses his cup and goes to lie down, curling up uncomfortably in the tiny visitor bed. Lying there a little cramped, he blurts without thinking, It's late. Let's get some rest. Call me if you need anything. As he finishes speaking, he remembers he's not talking to a real patient. Somehow, he keeps saying the wrong things today. Zhao Yulan has never been more deeply and soberly Zhao Yulan has never been more deeply and soberly aware of the sad fact that he's a moron. He decides to shut up, lie on his side, close his eyes, and pretend to sleep. But neither of them can fall asleep that night. The next few days, Zhuheng is the first to notice that their chief Zhao has changed his evil ways. More specifically, he no longer goes drinking with his fat brother Mr. Lang, he no longer spouts BS all day long, and he no longer finds excuses to flirt idly with Professor Shen. He stopped flirting with Professor Shen? Oh no, so are they like taking a break? Are they not seeing each other right now because they're so embarrassed? Even when they want to claim work expenses for shopping at the local night market, Chief Zhao approves it with a hand wave. He doesn't scold anyone and doesn't seem to want to tag along either. Shenwei is still in the hospital for observation, and Zhao Yulan comes with his laptop every day. Oh, okay, so he's still visiting him. Every day, Zhao Yulan comes with his laptop, nestled in the small visitor bed, surfing the internet or looking up some peculiar information or other. The strangest thing, though, is that Zhuheng hears Zhao Yulan secretly ordering Go Changcheng to bring him some clothes from his luggage at the hotel. All this makes Zhuheng stare at Zhao Yulan in deep thought. She suspects that he got drunk and then somehow did something to Shenwei? Got so rough that Shenwei had to be rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night? But in that regard, she's still puzzled. Zhao Yulan doesn't get drunk easily, and that day only Shenwei was actually drunk. Zhao Yulan was definitely still conscious and rational. Besides, Zhao Yulan's reputation as a lover isn't bad. Those who've dated him all admit that he's willing to spend money, is loyal, and parted with them on good terms. Nobody ever spoke of any bad habits, let alone non-consent. Or perhaps Shenwei is just so charming that Zhao Yulan lost his mind in desperation and did something indecent to him? Actually, Zhuheng, it's the opposite. It's the other way around. Shenwei, while drunk, took some liberties with your boss. It's just that everyone seems to think that Zhao Yulan is the gong and Shenwei is the show, but in reality, it's the other way around. Zhuheng ponders and ponders, but still doesn't understand. She thinks bitterly. Is this Shenwei guy really that good? That night, Zhao Yulan asked Shenwei to play along, and somehow he's done so. 2 days later, the diagnosis is that he went into cardiac arrest due to an allergy to alcohol. As Mr. Long bids them farewell at the airport, he's deeply apologetic and tugs at Shenwei's hands. My brother, if I'd known you can't drink, I wouldn't have let you touch any alcohol at all. Zhao Yulan thinks of who this fat guy is calling brother, and his eyelids twitch inadvertently. He's probably thinking, how dare you refer to his lord the Ghost Slayer so informally, calling him brother. He's thousands of years older than you are. Show some respect. Mr. Long glances towards Zhao Yulan, and as he sees his expression, he lets go of Shenwei at once. Next time, I'll make it up to you. You can drink tea, and I'll down 2 pints. How about that? Shenwei doesn't understand why he thinks drinking 2 pints counts as making it up to him, but he nods politely. Zhao Yulan, who's carrying both their bags, reminds him, it's time to go through security. Shenwei turns around quickly. I can take that myself. Zhao Yulan dashes ahead, carrying his luggage for him without saying a word. The SIU boys witness all of this, and led by Lin Jing, they cough suggestively. They don't understand their chief's misery. Intending to cause further chaos, they make all sorts of faces and collectively tease Zhao Yulan. Lin Jing turns around with a look of deep affection and asks Chu Shuzhi, are you hungry? Chu Shuzhi covers half his face with the boarding pass and feigns coyness. Oh, I'm fine. Wait here, I'll get you something to eat. Chu Shizhi keeps covering his face as if his teeth are sore, and says in a flirtatious tone, oh, don't trouble yourself, there's stuff to eat on the plane. Lin Jing imitates Zhao Yulan's arrogance and waves his hand. Is that even food for humans? Even if it were, would I let you eat something like that? And that time at Dragon City Airport, Zhao Yulan bought Shenwei some junk food for humans. Recalling how silly the chief was, the guys shoot each other dirty looks and flash dirty smiles. Zhu Hong elbows Go Chang Cheng. Xiao Go, do you have anyone you like? Go Chang Cheng blushes and shakes his head. Zhu Hong says meaningfully to Zhao Yulan's back, if you do in the future, learn from your chief. You'll become the heartbreaker of this new generation. But of course, if you want to stay in a relationship for good, be selective in what you learn. That dude usually messes things up in the end. Go Chang Cheng's face and ears redden. He's getting the faint impression that Zhu Hong is cursing the chief in broad daylight. Zhao Yulan turns around and glares at them. The depressed chief cannot put into words how embarrassed he is at this bunch of a-holes following him around, mocking him the whole time. He usually has thick skin, so thick that not even the olive mountains and rivers could get through, but now his face heats up a little. On their trip here, Zhao Yulan asks the air hostess to change his seat, following behind Shenwei like a housefly tailing a farting butt, not giving a damn about the kind of exhibition he made of himself. Now, Zhao Yulan isn't really in the mood, but as he checks his boarding pass, he realizes that Lin Jing switched their seats intentionally to 2 seats next to each other, away from the group. As Lin Jing helps him with his luggage, he whispers in his ear, "You don't have to thank me, Chief." Zhao Yulan grits his teeth. "I thank all your ancestors for this." But his lousy teammates will not let him switch back, so he suffers through the 3-hour flight until they finally land. Then, Lin Jing realizes that Shenwei didn't bring his car, since he brought his students along. So, the fake monk diligently sends the students home by taxi, and finally turns towards Shenwei like a matchmaker, all smiles. "Doesn't Professor Shen live quite close to Chief Zhao? He can drive you back then." Zhao Yulan doesn't say a word, but in his mind, he sticks needle after needle into this bastard Lin Jing, until he looks like a hedgehog. Lin Jing feels a resentment. He turns around and lets out an explosive sneeze. Shenwei smiles. No need. I will call a taxi." Zhao Yulan squeezes out a smile and takes his luggage. Let me drive you. It's late. If I drive you, it's... He wants to say safer, but before he can, he unfortunately recalls that night when he helped Shenwei with the gangsters. Not only did he beat them up, he intentionally put on a cool and badass pretense. Like a stupid and conceited peacock fanning its tail when everyone can see its dirty ass. The smile on Zhao Yulan's face falters. The novel's title is right after all. Moonlight Reminiscence is unbearable. Oh, he's embarrassed. He turns around and walks towards the car park determinedly, scolding himself in his mind. "Zhao Yulan, just how much of an idiot are you?" Zhao Yulan drives into his apartment in complete silence and stops directly in front of Shenwei's place. We arrived." Shenwei looks up at the apartment building, but doesn't get out of his seat. He asks, "How did you know I live here?" Zhao Yulan has nothing to say and only laughs softly. Shenwei looks at him, and suddenly it says, "Guardian, you must have a lot of things to ask me, don't you?" Zhao Yulan doesn't speak. The two lock eyes in the rearview mirror. After a while, Shenwei lowers his eyes. Then, why don't you ask? Zhao Yulan stays silent for a while before he says, "If you assume this human form to stay here, it's probably not for a usual errand. Is it for something very important, Your Honor?" "No," Shenwei says. "It's just for personal reasons. It's just because of someone." Zhao Yulan doesn't have to ask who that someone is at this point. Oh, end of chapter. Okay. So, to recap chapter 44, Shenwei wakes up and he ends up coming clean. He reveals his Ghost Slayer form to Zhao Yulan, and Zhao Yulan's like, "Well, I actually wasn't sure, like, wasn't completely sure, but you confirmed it, so thank you for that, I guess. Now I feel really awkward and embarrassed for acting all high and mighty and acting like a badass in front of you, Your Honor, when you could definitely hold your own. I must have looked like a laughingstock." Yeah. And so he no longer flirts with Shenwei, so I wonder how Shenwei's gonna feel about that, because Zhao Yulan is now kind of distancing himself. He still visited him in the hospital every day, but he's acting more distant and reserved and polite. So I wonder if Shenwei's gonna feel bad about that, because I think secretly he did enjoy Zhao Yulan flirting with him because he does adore Zhao Yulan, and he is here because of Zhao Yulan, so he's probably gonna address that as well. I know that he wants to talk to Shenwei. I mean, I know that Zhao Yulan wants to speak to Shenwei about it, but he also doesn't want to pry because he feels like it's not his position. But at the same time, they're gonna have to clear out the air eventually, or it'll just be walking on eggshells all the time, you know? So yeah, they finally finish their mission. They head back to the Dragon City. I believe that's where they live, right? Dragon City. And they all go home. And so Zhao Yulan gets roped into driving Shenwei back to his apartment, and when they get there, Shenwei's like, "You wanted to talk to me, right?" So it looks like they're gonna end up kind of coming clean, or maybe explaining the situation a little more. Maybe Shenwei's gonna reveal why he is hiding using a human identity, and maybe why he seems to know a lot about Zhao Yulan, despite Zhao Yulan not knowing anything about Shenwei. Yeah, so a very two interesting chapters, really fun. We got some intimate moments, we got some comedy, we got some embarrassed Zhao Yulan, which we don't get often because he has thick skin, and so now you can see his internal monologuing of him being really embarrassed, so that's fun. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's read-along, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!